Speak to Max Wolff about this. He's an economist and visiting professor at the school, a new school in New York City. He's also the founder of Systemic Ventures, and he's joining us from New York. Max, good to have you with us. So what happened? Was it the economy stupid?
Sure. So I'm an economist, so we're all kind of inclined to talk about what we know about. I do think that the Democrats missed the upset from lower income earners, who are a rising portion of America. And I think that was something that they paid for. I think the inflation argument was pretty successfully hung around their necks, although I don't think that the problem for most American households is inflation. I think more the problem for a lot of American households is that their wages haven't kept up with inflation for 50 years. And while the Democratic Party is certainly a part of that story, it's hard to blame that all on Joe Biden. But I do think that they really poorly messaged their successes, and they left the story of the Democratic Party largely up to a professional machine and an individual and President Trump, who have been running for president and mastering these narratives for 10 years and playing catch up on 100 days when you've mismatched the rhetoric and the explanation for 10 years is a pretty tricky business.
Right.
I think I would always start with the numbers. And so just so we sort of, because no one tells this story, there's 350 million Americans. For each one who went to the polls, 2 stayed home. So it's hard to know what America thinks. And that's true no matter what happens in an election. And then this was roughly a tie in terms of the number of people who actually voted for these two folks, although obviously he did much better in the all-important electoral college and did a bit better in the general election, it seems, too. But so it's hard to infer depth there. But I think the story of migrants as an issue and the story of affordability crises, which are very real, resonated much better than her story about rights and building a bigger future, which is fairly abstract and may not speak to pocketbook pain very well.
All right. So we perhaps may understand what happened there, but now looking ahead to what he's promised to do when it comes to the economy. He said he would slap tariffs on imports, cut taxes and government regulation. On the taxes first, the tax cuts, we saw the stock market react very positively to his election, to his victory. We saw a surge. What will be the size and shape of any tax cuts, and what would that mean for the American economy?
Yeah, so you saw the stock markets rally a bunch. Now, that's two things. A lot of that's relief that it's not a long, drawn-out process with multiple people saying they won. I think everyone was relieved by that, given recent history. And then there's some sense that the Republican Party might be good for the stock market, although it has underperformed the Democratic Party sometimes. It's been very good at other times. Any kind of tax cuts that leave more money in the hands of the folks who invest in stocks and bonds is good. I would caution also that the bond market, trying to figure out his tax policy, was selling off a little bit today. So tax cuts are always popular. However, when you have major structural deficits like we do, you actually can't cut taxes without massive spending cuts, which caused the economic pain that got Donald Trump elected, accusing other side of that and pointing to failures of the Democratic Party. So I think if we see anything like mass deportations or tariffs, we'll have the kind of inflation we haven't seen before in a long time. And we will not have a happy, healthy stock market. So the hope is that we don't see that.
On the tariffs, because there's a great deal of concern from European countries, from China and so on. He's promised to add tariffs of 10 to 20% on all imports, with significantly higher levies on imports from China, right? That's going to increase inflation, you say. But what about what it would mean for the global economy? What will be the consequences of that?
So it would be a shock wave into the global economy. Most of the relatively historically moderate inflation we saw that got people so upset is much lower than this would cause. It's also a kind of 19th century economic view, which is why every single major professional economist of all political stripes has advised against it, because when you increase tariffs, you're just charging consumers more, what we know of as inflation, and you can't actually reproduce specialty economies and production systems around the world. It takes years and big investments, and people don't always want to make big investments and spend years if they think that the policy in question might be reversed in 4 years. So that creates a big problem. It also takes years, and it's a supply chain shock. And what did cause a fair amount of our inflation were supply chain shocks coming from the trade wars that we had right going into COVID, and then also just COVID, which really threw off production and distribution processes. So it would cause a massive inflation, as would any kind of major deportation of the immigrant community, sometimes underdocumented or undocumented here, which does a grossly disproportionate amount of work in and around our agriculture and food businesses, care businesses, construction businesses, et cetera, which would make things more expensive. So you're looking at two massive supply chain shocks with depressive growth pass-through and spiking prices, which we know of as stagflation, the less popular cousin of inflation.
Thank you so much, Max, for your insight. Very good to talk to you about this. Max Wolff is an economist joining us there from New York. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.